Clara wiped down the counter at Sunrise Diner, the same way she had done every morning for the past 3 years, and the same way she would do it again tomorrow, unless something changed. Nothing ever changed on Maple Creek's quiet Main Street. Not the creak of the front door. Not the smell of burnt coffee and warm syrup. And certainly not the slow shuffle of old Mr. Walter Briggs making his way through that door at exactly 7:15, same as always, wearing that same fraying gray coat that had seen better decades. "Morning, Clara," he said, settling into his usual chair by the window, the one with the crack in the seat cushion that nobody ever got around to fixing. "Morning, Mr. Briggs." She poured his coffee without being asked. "Black, no sugar, cold out there today." "Cold everywhere when you get to my age." He smiled, and it was that kind of smile that made Clara feel like the world still had something good left in it. Most of the other regulars barely noticed Walter. They saw an old man, alone, quiet, probably counting pennies. Clara saw something else, a man who asked thoughtful questions, who listened when she talked about her bad days, who once spent 40 minutes telling her about the summer he met his late wife at a dancing hall, his eyes going somewhere far away and soft. She paid for his breakfast herself on the mornings he reached into his coat and frowned at his wallet. "It's on me," she'd say, before he could finish apologizing. He would nod slowly, fold his hands on the table and say, "You're a good woman, Clara." She never thought much of it. Kindness wasn't a transaction to her. During the brutal winter of the second year, she bought him a pair of wool gloves from the little shop 2 doors down, handed them to him without ceremony, stuffed into a brown paper bag. He stared at them for a long moment before putting them on, right there at the table, flexing his fingers slowly. He didn't say thank you that day. He just looked at her with something in his eyes that went much deeper than gratitude. Then came the morning she received the call from Northgate Medical Center. Walter Briggs had been admitted, chest complications. She drove there after her shift, still in her uniform, and sat with him for 2 hours. He told her about his daughter, about his son, about the years he'd spent alone after the business world swallowed everything that used to matter. He talked about betrayal the way only someone who had lived it could, quietly, without anger, just a tired kind of sadness that had long since made peace with itself. She held his hand while he drifted in and out of sleep. She never once thought to ask what he was worth. If you're watching this for the first time, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. Because this is exactly the kind of story we tell here, and you do not want to miss what comes next. 3 weeks after Walter was discharged, everything stopped. He didn't come in on Monday. Clara assumed he was tired. Tuesday passed, then Wednesday. By Friday, she was standing at his usual table with a fresh cup of coffee, and something in the air felt different, heavier, like the silence before rain. She called the number he'd once scribbled on a napkin. No answer. She tried again the next morning, and the morning after that. She told herself not to panic. She panicked anyway. On the 9th day, Clara was wiping down the front window when she saw them. 3 black vehicles moving in slow convoy down Maple Creek's Main Street, stopping directly outside Sunrise Diner. She watched, cloth in hand, as the doors opened and men in suits stepped out. Then one more man emerged from the middle car, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that looked like it hadn't allowed itself to soften in years. The diner went quiet the moment he walked in. Every head turned. He looked around once, deliberately, until his eyes landed on Clara. "Are you the one they call Clara Simmons?" His voice was measured, controlled, the voice of someone who spent a lot of time in rooms where words had consequences. "That's me," she said carefully. "My name is Daniel Reed." He paused. "Walter Briggs was my grandfather." The cup she was holding nearly slipped. "Was." "Please," he said, nodding toward the back corner. "I need a few minutes with you." They sat across from each other in the booth where Walter used to let his coffee go cold while he talked. Daniel Reed sat stiffly, his lawyers arranged in a quiet row nearby like expensive furniture. Clara sat with her hands clasped on the table, bracing herself for something she hadn't named yet. "My grandfather passed away 11 days ago," Daniel said. "He left specific instructions that you be contacted directly." Clara felt the bottom drop out of the room. She pressed her lips together, breathed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She stopped. There were no words that were big enough. "He was important to me." Something shifted, almost imperceptibly, in Daniel's expression. "He left you a property," he continued, looking down at the document in his hands. "A house on Lake Renfield, a trust fund amounting to $400,000, and a minority stake in Briggs Reed Holdings." Clara stared at him. "I don't understand," she said. "Neither did we," Daniel replied. And the way he said it told her everything about the conversation that must have happened in whatever room the family had gathered in when they first heard the news. The will reading was 3 days later. Clara sat at the end of a long mahogany table surrounded by people who looked at her the way expensive people look at things they consider mistakes. Walter's son, a man named Preston who wore his wealth like armor, stared at her from across the room with barely concealed contempt. Two of Walter's daughters sat in whispered conference, glancing at Clara every few seconds with eyes sharpened to a point. The lawyers worked through the document methodically. Standard allocations, business assets distributed among family members, properties divided. Then the moment arrived, a clean, unmistakable paragraph that removed all ambiguity. To Clara Simmons, in recognition of genuine and selfless compassion extended without condition or expectation, I leave the following. Preston was on his feet before the lawyer finished the sentence. "This is absurd," he said. "She's a waitress. She manipulated a lonely old man." "Sit down, Preston." Daniel's voice cut across the room like a blade. "Don't tell me to sit down, Daniel. This woman extracted herself into his life, and he made his choice when his mind was clear and documented. Multiple witnesses, multiple attestations." Daniel's jaw was tight. "Sit down." Preston sat, but his eyes didn't leave Clara. Then the lawyer pressed play on the tablet in front of him. And Walter Briggs appeared on the screen, seated in what looked like his living room, framed by afternoon light. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "If you're watching this," Walter said, and his voice was exactly how she remembered it, warm and a little hoarse, "then I'm no longer around to buy my own coffee." A pause, a small smile. "The people in that room share my blood. Clara shared my burdens. There is a difference, and I spent my last years understanding exactly what that difference means. She never once asked who I was. That alone made her extraordinary." The room was silent in the particular way that silence falls, when no one has the words to fill it. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth. She wasn't manipulated into any of this. She was seen. Go ahead and drop a comment right now. What would you have done in Clara's position? Would you have accepted the inheritance or walked away? Let us know below while the story continues. The legal challenges came fast and loud. Preston filed a petition within 2 weeks claiming diminished capacity, undue influence, and whatever else his lawyers could stack together into a reasonable-sounding argument. Articles appeared online. Clara's name attached to words like asterisk scheme asterisk, an opportunist asterisk, and gold digger. She sat in her small apartment reading things about herself that she didn't recognize, written by people who had never once met her. She almost gave it back. She sat across from Daniel at a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground, his suggestion, and told him exactly that. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life defending who I am," she said. "Maybe it's easier to just walk away." Daniel looked at her steadily. "My grandfather didn't choose you because it was easy. He chose you because you were real, and I am not going to let them take that from him." It was the first time she'd seen him say something he hadn't rehearsed. It changed something between them. Over the following months, they worked together constantly, meetings with legal teams, document reviews, court preparation. Daniel was precise, disciplined, sometimes frustrating. He argued with her about strategy. He pushed back when she suggested compromise. He was infuriating in a way that meant he was paying attention. She noticed, somewhere in the middle of a late-night session, surrounded by financial records, that he'd started bringing her tea without being asked. He noticed, somewhere around the third month, that he looked for her car in the parking lot before he looked for his own lawyers. Neither of them said anything about it. What they did uncover, buried deep in the company's internal transaction records, was something none of the family had expected anyone to find. Preston had been siphoning funds from Briggs Reed Holdings for years, small enough amounts at first to avoid scrutiny, then larger, then systematic. Walter had suspected it in his final months, which was why he'd quietly restructured his estate the way he had. The court case collapsed spectacularly around Preston's legal team. The evidence was undeniable. The petition was dismissed. The family's claims evaporated. And Preston Briggs walked out of a courthouse with significantly less than he walked in with. Clara stood on the courthouse steps afterward with the afternoon sun in her face and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, not relief exactly. Something quieter, like a door that had been stuck for years finally swinging open. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked, standing beside her. "Like myself," she said. He nodded. Like that was the most important thing she could have said. A year later, Clara stood at the front of a bright, newly built community center on the edge of Maple Creek, the Walter Briggs Community Hub, a place for adult literacy classes, youth mentorship, and a small cafe run by volunteers that opened its doors every morning at 7:15. She had poured herself into every detail of it. The colors of the walls, the arrangement of the tables, the bronze plaque at the entrance. She was halfway through her speech when she felt the shift in the crowd. She looked up. Daniel was walking through the center aisle, holding an envelope. He stopped at the foot of the steps and held it up. "He left one more letter," Daniel said quietly, "sealed separately. He asked that it be opened today." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she took it. She read it aloud, because Walter would have wanted that. "If you're hearing this together, then neither of you is as stubborn as I suspected, or perhaps you both finally ran out of excuses. Daniel, if you've earned this woman's trust, don't hesitate. You've been hesitating your whole life. Clara, stop measuring your worth by what other people were willing to give you. You always deserved more than you accepted. The coffee was never really the point. Take good care of each other." Laughter moved through the crowd, wet at the edges. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. Clara didn't need him to say anything. She was already nodding before he got down on one knee. The crowd erupted. She said yes through tears and laughter, and the particular joy of a moment that feels both completely unexpected and entirely inevitable. They opened the center's doors together that afternoon, side by side, the way Walter Briggs had probably imagined it from the very beginning, sitting in his window seat, watching a kind woman bring him coffee, knowing exactly what he was doing, and doing it anyway. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Every single like and comment helps us keep bringing these stories to you, and Walter Briggs would definitely approve.